I must say this is the largest audience I've ever spoken to, so if I start stuttering, give me a break. I'd like to start out with, first of all, thanking everybody for coming. I really appreciate you taking your time out from your schedule to come and listen to the exciting announcement we have. 40 years ago, when I bought Paschall Truck Line, I was fortunate enough to meet a gentleman named L.W. Pascal. And Mr. Pascal trusted me enough to sell his truck line to me over the next 10 years. He financed it because I didn't have any money. Mr. Pascal, in his years of working with Paschall Truck Lines, had built it from a limestone livestock company to a general commodity LTL company. He was willing to believe that there was a big future in the LTL business, which he later proved that that was the case. He was grateful enough to give me the opportunity in 1973, when I was 27 years old, to buy Paschall Truck Lines. So, first of all, before we go any farther, we have a special guest here tonight, and that's Miss Mary Frank Pascal and Janice Pascal, L.W. Pascal's wife and daughter. Let's give them all a hand. Now, the reason they're our special guests, that if it wasn't for Mr. Pascal starting Paschall Truck Line and Mary Frank putting up with LW, we wouldn't be here. So I'm grateful to her as much as I am to Mr. Pascal. When we bought Paschall Truck Lines from L.W. Pascal, we did less than $1 million the first year. We had approximately 30 tractors, a couple of hundred trailers, and we were fortunate enough to decide at that point in time that we needed to expand in other territories. So we began our second year, and LW was a real big help in all this. Our second year, we decided to expand into the St. Louis, Louisville, Memphis, and Nashville market into other general commodities. And at that point, our second year was a great growth revenue. We had support from the local shippers that LW had built over the past 20, 30 years. There was one thing that LW always reminded me of. He says, I got to ask you something, son. He said, it took me 30 years to build this truck line, and you're wanting to buy it and pay for it in 10? He said, that doesn't sound right. And fortunately, that our agreement worked out fantastically. That was 40-something odd years ago that we made that agreement. We've been fortunate enough to continue to grow. PTL today has 380 support personnel. We have 950 tractors, 200 owner-operators. The first year we're in business, we did less than $1 million. Last year we did $220 million in revenue. Now, we bought a few truck lines on the way, but most of it was all internal growth. Now, through the years, we've been able to attract and keep fantastic people that were dedicated to the Paschall Truck Lines, and we always wanted to provide a happy, healthy environment and a place of employment that you could provide for you and your family. It's truly been an effort while I've been working for Paschall Truck Lines to be grateful to Mr. Pascal and giving me this opportunity. I'll always be grateful for him. There's a long-standing employees who believe in me, and he was willing to give me the opportunity to progress and make Paschall Truck Lines a continued success. During the 40 years that I've been with Paschall Truck Lines, the last 3 or 4 years have been a lot of changes in the regulations and the environment that we've had to live with. We've got the CSA, we've got the new hours of service, we got the e-logs. There's been a lot of transitions into changes for us. We've been fortunate to be able to adapt to those changes. We continue to grow. We continue to make the right moves and have been very successful in making those moves. Over the past few years, over the last 5 years, my brother, Chuck Wilson, Tom Stevens, and myself decided that I needed an exit plan. While we were traveling around, if something had happened to me in the last 5 years, meaning that if I was involved in an accident, health reason, or anything else that would put me in a position that I couldn't manage Paschall Truck Lines, it would be in a sort of a disarray and it would not function properly till we could get somebody else in. But because of the estate taxes and everything else that goes with that, it would probably cost most everybody their jobs. So once that thought process was brought to bear, we decided to make an exit plan for myself. Now, in that exit plan, over the past 5 years, we decided to look at other truck lines purchasing us. And when we looked at strategic carriers to look at us, we found out that most of them wanted to buy us and do away with the corporate headquarters in Murray, Kentucky. So we decided that wasn't an option. So the next thing we did was we decided to take on private equity groups. So we took a long time to make that decision. We went through 5 different private equity groups over a period of a year, year and a half, to come up with a decent exit plan for myself. And that didn't work out because private equity wants to buy the company. Within 2 to 3 years, they want to sell it and turn it for a profit. So then we decided to take a look at other options. Before we get into that other options, there's a couple of people I'd like to introduce and break in the middle of this speech. I'd like to introduce Alex Smith, Andy Mancher, Mike McKinnell, Alex Moss, David Cox, John Stanley. Now, you're going to get to know these people that are on the stage here very well over the next few years. Their potential, no, they're really not on, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can start that again. Tony Barnett, would you stand up? Kevin, you're sitting next to Tony. Would you stand up? Would y'all shake hands? Would all of Paschall Truck Lines employees stand up for just a second? The reason I want all of you to stand up is because the company has been sold to you. You now own 100% of Paschall Truck Lines. Thank you. So, I'm an employee also. That was the good news, okay? The bad news, I'm staying. By setting up a ESOP company, I was able to sell Paschall Truck Lines to the ESOP company, which in turn, the ESOP Trust, which in turn is full ownership to all the employees of Paschall Truck Lines. It's not 70%, it's not 75%, it's 100%. I am an employee just like you folks are an employee. Now, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to work together and continue this thing for another 40 years. But we've got an exit plan in place in the event something happens to me or I decide to leave. But at this point in time, I'm not going anywhere, so don't really get excited about that. I got a long-term contract, and it can be renewed. So my mission and my goal for the next 10 years is to build growth, build equity into the PTL Esop trustee plan for retirement for the employees in this room and their family. That's my goal over the next 10 years. I'm going to need everybody's help. We're going to have to work really hard to do that. But I really think it's a mission that we can do, and I think it's something that hopefully listening to this room of folks, that it energizes everybody to do a much better job than we've been able to do in the past. Not that you hadn't been doing a good job in the past, or we wouldn't be here after 40 years. But I do think that this has solved several problems. By setting up an ESOP and selling 100% of my stock to the ESOP, Paschall Truck Line will never leave this community. This community has been great for me, and we've all worked together and we've worked hard, and this is deserving of you folks in this room and your family. And I really feel that we've all got a great company here. We've got to continue to grow it. We've got to continue to expand it. I'm really thankful that I was given the opportunity to do this. And it's a good deal for everybody in this room, and it's a good deal for me. And I think it leaves a place in my heart that PTL was successful. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn the program back over to Tom Stevens and have him to introduce these gentlemen that y'all thought were the owners on the stage, but they're not. They're lawyers, accountants. They're all part of the deal. They're all people that assist us in making this transaction successful, and they're all part of what's going to continue to advise us and make us the most successful ESOP out there. So there's quite a few folks that we had into this transaction that worked with us and consulted us. It's not something that we did overnight. As I said earlier, we worked on this project for 5 years and the ESOP the last 2 years. So if there's anything to know about an ESOP, I think we're probably specialists in it because we had so many advisors telling us what to do. And at this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Tom Stevens.
Hi, I'm Tom Stevens, Executive Vice President of Paschall Truck Lines. And as Mr. Waller and Chuck said, welcome. Thank you for taking the time on a school night, okay? But as Mr. Waller said, there were an awful lot of people. We've got a list of about 15 or 20, but we only have about 5 up here that will say a little something. We're not going to take a lot of time, but I'd like to introduce them. They'll say a few words to all of us, and then we'll turn it over. We're going to have a PowerPoint slideshow by Alex Moss. So Steve Smith, Creek Duvall, was our lead attorney for us. And would you please say a few words?
I'd be happy to. Thanks, Tom. They told me I could only talk for 3 minutes. Can you imagine that, a lawyer only getting 3 minutes at a microphone? So I'll be brief. I represented the company with regard to structuring the ESOP and putting the plan together from a legal standpoint. That's all I do. I've been doing it for quite a few years, since 1984, and have done about 300 throughout the United States. And I can tell you with complete confidence that it takes a really special man to be willing to put up with putting in an ESOP and to turn over the ownership over time through the trust of an entire company to the employees. The vast majority of business owners sell their companies to a third party or to private equity, it takes a very special person to want the employees to own it, and you certainly have that here with Mr. Tony Waller. And carrying on the Paschall tradition is something that brings with it a great deal of responsibility, but it also brings with it a wonderful opportunity. My opinion is, for most of us, the only way to accrue wealth is through ownership of a for-profit corporation, unless you inherit something or win the lottery. You've got to build it up over time. And this is a long-term approach. You'll learn much more about the ESOP over time. There are lots of layers to it, but essentially, you're beneficiaries or participants in a trust, and that trust holds all the stock, and over a period of years, all the shares of Paschall stock will be allocated to accounts that you have in the plan, bookkeeping accounts, just like you do in the 401k plan, with the main, which is not going anywhere. And the main distinction, though, is the value of that account is based on the value of this company. And the people who have the most effect and can have the most effect on the value of the company and therefore of their retirement benefits through the ESOP trust, which are paid after you retire based on the value of the shares at that time, is you as the employees. As Mr. Waller said, it's a fantastic group of people, a lot of long-term employees. You'll learn that the ESOP is not an overnight thing. It takes several years for that value to build up. But it's a great opportunity. I hope you take that responsibility and hang on to it, and also hope that you thank Mr. Waller for what he's done for you. I wish you all the best of luck, and it sure would be nice to be in-house counsel here if they wanted an in-house lawyer and get some of those allocations, but I don't think that's going to happen. So good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Steve, we almost got by, so don't send us a bill for 15 minutes, okay? The next person I'd like to introduce, who has been, he's been a champion of ours, and he works for our outside auditors, Sapper and Miller, and he leads the ESOP practice in their firm, and that is Andy Manser.
Thanks, Tom. As mentioned, I'm Andy Mancher, and my firm, Sapper & Miller, or KSM, consults with and has worked with Paschall Truck Lines for many years on auditing and tax-related matters. And when the subject of the ESOP came up, we were a logical one to help Mr. Waller and the company officers consider it. I'm an ESOP employee owner myself. My firm, KSM, is 100% employee-owned like yours now. So it's something that I enjoy helping our clients look at and consider as a form of ownership. I love knowing that I've got a stake in the outcome at my job. The better work I do, the more money I am going to earn from my retirement account. And I believe in that. I travel the country talking about it, helping clients do it. Very proud to come down here today from Indiana, where we're headquartered in Indianapolis. Don't hold the fact I'm a Hoosier against me down here in Wildcat or Racer territory. But we love working with your company, and we'll continue to work with your company as you begin to understand and become an employee-owned enterprise. I want to thank Mr. Tony Waller for having me tonight, and his brother Gary, Tom, and Chuck, and everybody involved in the transaction team. It's great to know that we've sold the company to the employees. So tonight's yours. Congratulations.
Thanks, Andy. And I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't mention Steve is from Indianapolis also. Creek Duval is in Indianapolis, so we have a couple of Hoosiers. Now we're going to get to a Georgia peach. Michael McGintley is with Prairie Capital. And as an ESOP company, before Mr. Waller could sell his stock, there had to be a valuation. And you have to have an independent individual or company do the valuation. We couldn't have Sapper and Miller. So Michael works for the Prairie Capital, and they did the valuation, and he'll probably be doing it for every year, and every year we'll have another valuation. And Michael's from Atlanta, Georgia.
My name is Michael. I work for Prairie Capital Advisors, and the opposite of Steve, I'm a numbers guy, and so when they said I had to speak for 3 minutes, I said, well, what am I going to do with the other 2? Our firm serves as independent financial advisors to Esop trustees. That's what we do, and that's our specialty. I like to think we're the best in the country at it, and we were very proud to be a part of your transaction. Our role is to advise the trustee of the ESOP on the value of your company. So from the very beginning, we were able to look at the numbers that you all generate and come up with a value that was fair for the ESOP to pay. So I wanted you to know that I work for you, and I'm here for you. This is an incredible opportunity that you all have. From this point forward, all of the benefits of equity ownership accrue to all of you. I don't work for Mr. Waller, and so my opinion is independent. And he had a lot of other opportunities for what to do with this company. There were outside buyers, private equity firms, and at the end of the day, he chose you. And I want you to all just to take a minute and think about that, because that's a very special thing, and that's not what most owners of companies do. And so it's a great opportunity and a great benefit to all of you, and I'm proud to be a part of that team. So congratulations.
We do have a few attorneys on the stage, and there's a couple more I want to introduce that were very instrumental in doing everything with us up until the final day. And they're both from Nashville, David Cox and John Stanley. They're with H3GM. I asked which way the best way to say it, and David said just say H3GM. So, David?
Good evening. I think that the reason that I went last is, unlike everyone else on the stage, I did not represent you in the transaction. I was an employee of Mr. Waller, and I spent most of the evening trying to convince him that because of that, and because I've spent the last 5 years with him looking at transactions, that I should get to participate in the ESOP. So far it hasn't worked, but not for lack of trying. When I thought about the kind of meeting that we're having tonight, and obviously you came without full appreciation of what was going to happen tonight, and the guys told me that they wanted me to get up and talk. I thought, I'd be happy to do that, but you really should have a DJ here. I mean, this should be a party. This is an exciting moment for all of you, for Mr. Waller, for us, because we've gotten to know him so well over the last 5 years. Really spending a lot of time with him as his employee. He's yelled at me. He's ignored my advice from time to time. So real quickly, I'll give you one piece of advice that I'll throw out that my dad told me when I graduated from law school. He always had pearls of wisdom for me. I was very happy and proud, and I graduated, and he came over and put his arm around me, and he said, "Son, just remember, nobody cares what lawyers have to say." So I'll try to be brief, and I'll recognize nobody cares what lawyers have to say, but I do want to say thank you to Mr. Waller, maybe for the same reason that I hope you say thank you to Mr. Waller. It's been a tremendous pleasure and opportunity to work for him. This is a wonderful transaction. We went through a lot of different alternatives that he could have done. He consistently had complaints, frankly, about those other transactions. And those complaints typically came back to some form or variation of, how does that affect my employees? How does that affect my people? How does that affect the people that are loyal to me? And it was fascinating to see. And so it was fantastic to get an opportunity to meet the rest of these people and see what kind of transaction they could provide, not only to him, but to you. So in the end, I think this really is a party. It should be a celebration. I hope you're excited about it. I hope you're more excited about it 3 years from now, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, as you see what it's like to be an owner. I'll leave you with one quick story. One night at a particularly difficult point in the transaction, a lot of people were tired, and these are complicated transactions. I called Tony probably 7 o'clock at night. I started talking to him, and I tend to talk too long. At some point, he interrupted me and he said, "David, get the deal done for my people. I'm going back inside and I'm going to eat my spaghetti dinner, and I don't want to talk to you again." So he got the deal done. Tony got his spaghetti. I hope he has spaghetti for many years to come, as do you, and thank you.
We have one more speech, and it's for an unsung hero, the big brother of Tony Waller. And Gary Waller has been working with us for about 3 years now, and he always says he's the brains of the outfit. So I'm going to let the brains of the outfit talk for a few minutes.
Well, this all began with me on a February cold day in Smyrna, Tennessee in 1946. I raced home with 2 or 3 of my buddies. I heard my little brother had come home, has arrived. I had 2 sisters. I was looking forward to a little brother. And it's been a joy being a big brother to him ever since. I knew that he had an entrepreneurial spirit early on. We moved to Nashville. My dad was a painting contractor, painting houses, raised 4 kids, never made more than $8,000 a year in his life, had a 3rd grade education. Our first house in Nashville, we thought was a mansion, was a 900 square foot, 3-bedroom house, 1 bath with a bathtub, no shower. So you can imagine what mornings looked like with 2 girls and 2 boys, and the dad trying to get off to work and school and so forth. He one day was up playing with the preacher's son. They were about the same age at the Baptist church there, and the preacher's son informed him that there were some coins somebody had put in the baptistry. So they determined that those coins weren't doing anybody any good in the baptistry. But they knew with their shorts, back in those days, hot, didn't have anything but shorts on. But they knew they couldn't come home with shorts wet. So they skinny dipped in the baptistry at the Baptist church. So I knew he had an entrepreneurial spirit, and because of that entrepreneurial spirit, it cost me one summer. I was a bat boy for the old Nashville Vols downtown. They didn't pay anything, but they'd give me baseballs and things like that. I'd get them autographed, and it was so exciting. I'd accumulated a basket about that big with balls with signatures, and no telling what they'd be worth today. And I'd go upstairs. I'd hidden them. I'd go upstairs and get those things out and rub them, and just thoroughly enjoyed that collection. One day I went up there and I couldn't find them. They were nowhere to be found. Only to find out my 6-year-old brother had sold them for a quarter and a nickel and a dime, whatever it took to get a popsicle. In our neighborhood, the popsicle man would come around pushing the wagon, and he'd bang, bang, bang. You could hear him for half a mile. And, of course, Tony would come running in, "Popsicle man, popsicle man." And he was always a favorite of Mom, so she made sure he had money to buy popsicles. But that collection would be worth thousands of dollars today. I didn't see a nickel of it. But every kid in the neighborhood had a new ball to play with. But they didn't care it had ink on it. They scuffed it up, whatever. It didn't make any difference. And I knew early on that he was a man who would plan ahead. He didn't think just about today. He thought ahead. And again, Mom and Dad would go to the grocery store, always on Saturday, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening. They'd come home with a bunch of groceries, and put them all in place. about Monday or Tuesday, we'd start looking for something that they had bought. And sure enough, if it were candy or sweets or something that he liked, he always managed to slip back in the kitchen to get those out and go hide them. So that come Tuesday or Wednesday, he was the only one enjoying all the goodies and the sweets, and none of the rest of us had any. So he was a forward-looking fella, needless to say, early on. And then I worked at a grocery store, and I'd look around, and here he'd be headed up that way with his dog. You know, and I said, I know what he wants. He'd come in, he said, I want a Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola and a candy bar. So that was my job, to keep him supplied with Coca-Colas and candy bars. But then he went on to grade school there in West Nashville and on to H.G. Hill. Played basketball, baseball, football. He was a good athlete. He wasn't fond of the books, though. He liked to party. He just enjoyed that very much. When he was in grade school, the grade school was not too far from our house, Brookmead. My daddy had an old paint truck, you know, that he'd haul stuff around in, and he'd occasionally leave it at home. He figured out how to hotwire the thing as a 7th and 8th graders and would drive that thing to school, and he and the janitor had a deal where he could park it in the back so nobody would see it. Only problem was my dad came home one day looking for it, and he couldn't find it. He asked my mom, and she said, well, Tony drove it to school, and he's only a 7th or 8th grader, you know. So he went and confronted my brother about stealing the truck. So I think he gave him a stern enough lecture that wasn't going to happen again. But he was always adventuresome. He would try anything. So the relationship has grown through the years. Needless to say, we've supported each other. There have been times when he's come to my rescue, and hopefully there's been times when I've been there for him. When he bought Paschall Truck Lines, first of all, when he just told me he was going in the trucking business, I said, trucking business? There's nobody in the family doing trucking. He said, I know, but I just like them big old rigs. It's just something about them that excite me. So it wasn't long till he worked for a company, moved up, another company, move up, another company, move up, and then the Pascal opportunity came, and he was prepared for it. And it was great to see him take hold of it. One thing about it, though, he hasn't developed any bad hobbies like golf or something like that. He's just given it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for all these years. And that's what you've got to do. One thing we learned from our dad was a work ethic. Our dad would get up early in the morning, come home late at night. I remember many times him leaving that old panel truck with the window broken out with cardboard in it. And I said, Dad, what you going to paint today? He said, I don't know, but the time I get home tonight, somebody's going to have something painted. So the work ethic and work has never been a problem with us or our sisters, and we're grateful for that. And certainly what he has done here is something that we're extremely proud of, and of course we've always been proud to call him our brother. Life has a way of moving ahead of you too fast. And I'm 74 years old, and it just seems like yesterday, you know, when he bought the truck line. So even though what we've put in place is a long-term retirement plan that's going to be there when you retire, it won't be long till you'll be there. It'll be there a lot quicker than you think. So I encourage each of you to do your best to help build the company. One thing that hasn't been said is this ESOP's already in place. It's a done deal. It's not something that's going to be done. It was done a month ago. I don't know how we kept it a secret, but we did. Another thing is, it's not costing you a nickel. You keep your 401k, you just add this to it. And that, I think, will be sufficient for many of you to enjoy those years when you're my age and older, and be thankful that there was a young man who went out on the limb, and that there was a generous man and woman who allowed him to purchase Paschall Truck Lines. Thank you. I look forward to being around when you see me around. Usually have something going on, but it's been a joy putting this together, and I've really looked forward to this night to be able to share it with you. Thank you.
There's one gentleman that I haven't introduced yet, and his name is Alex Moss. And Alex is going to go through a PowerPoint for everybody to get some idea what we're talking about. It's very complicated. As Mr. Waller and Gary and everybody has said up here, it's been a long, arduous journey. We've had a lot of fun. We've had a lot of seriousness. We've had a lot of laughing, had a lot of crying, but we're glad it's over. And everybody here, you know, many carriers say, we have associates. You know what we have here now? We have owners. All of us are owners, and that is a big word to say. Hello, owner. So that's what we're going to do. But Alex Moss, who is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he's with Praxis and Company. They're a consulting group that works exclusively with ESOPs. So with that, Alex, I'll let you take over, and thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening. I'm supposed to be wearing a mic. Is that coming through okay? All right, so I'm going to meander around up here on stage. Thank you, Tom, and Chuck, Mr. Waller, Mrs. Waller, and Ms. Pascal. It's really an opportunity to come and speak with you. Before I get started, could I just ask y'all to stand up, turn around, and say hello to an owner? There's a sense in which that's pretty much all you need to know. You know, my work's done. I would say when you think about the ESOP, there's one other thing I'd like you to keep in mind. Two little words, repeat after me. Fisher Price. Fisher Price. Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm from Philly. That's a long way away. I wasn't here when Fisher Price closed up shop. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people got hurt. If we don't have a better way to buy businesses in the United States and keep the local employment and business opportunity, then we're all going to be Fisher Price. And nothing against them. They did what they needed to do, but we have a better way. And what you're seeing tonight is the outline of that. I'm going to go through a bunch of PowerPoint slides. I go all over the country doing this, do it all the time. We will have a couple of minutes for questions at the end. But I want to encourage you not to see tonight as the end point of your learning about this. This is just day one of the rest of your life as an owner of Paschall Trucking. So I'm going to throw a lot of information at you. But the way I think about it is I'm going to flip open the hood and let you see the engine and show you how the thing runs. But we're not going to ask anybody to become a mechanic. We're not going to ask you to become an ESOP attorney. That's what we got Steve Smith for. We're not going to ask you to become an investment banker, valuation expert. That's what we got Michael McGinley for, etc. We've got a lot of really, really awesome advisors. What we want for you all is to understand a little bit about how this thing works. When you leave this evening, We have a printed handout for you, and right at the end I'll give you also a list of other information that you can expect to receive over the next couple of weeks and months and years. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We're going to be at it for a long, long time, and tonight is just, may not be night one for these guys, they've been at it a while, but night one for the rest of us in terms of getting familiar with the ESOP. So the kind of information that you're going to see over time is a lot up front about why do we have an ESOP. And you've already heard Mr. Waller's explanation of that, and I'm going to put my 2 cents in on that one also, because that's very much in keeping with why most people do ESOPs when they set them up in the U.S. And then I'll talk about, well, we keep using this word ESOP. What actually is that? And a little bit about how it works. I'm going to go light on the ESOP rules. How does your account work? How many of you have a 401k plan? So the ESOP's going to look pretty familiar to you in the sense that it has similar kinds of rules. It's a kind of retirement plan. But instead of using your money, as Steve Smith said, to buy outside stock, we're going to be using company profits over the next number of years to pay for Mr. Waller's stock. That means we haven't paid for it yet. We got some debt. You're going to hear about that. We're going to have to pay that debt back. That's a good thing, because otherwise we would have had to come to you. Reason that how many spouses here this evening? Any of y'all want to hear it? You know, honey, I'm home. How was work today? That was pretty good. What happened? I gave Tony Waller some of my money. He's a nice guy. I gave him some money. Why? To buy his company. Anybody in? Anybody want pay cuts? Borrow, remortgage your home? Right? That stuff doesn't work. But on the other hand, we kind of know that money doesn't grow on trees and nothing. You don't get something for nothing. So how are we going to do this? And the way we're going to do it is we borrowed a bunch of money. We're going to pay it back over time, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how that works. Okay? So, starting at the beginning, why do you do an ESOP? I'm going to talk to you about the owner's eye view, which you've already heard direct from Mr. Waller, but I want to talk about it broadly. And then I want to talk about it from the employee's eye view. What's it mean for you? From the owner's eye view, you either start a business, or in this case, you take over, you purchase an existing successful business, and you run that business for a long time. And the question is, what happens? Is anybody here that has never sat in bed and said to themselves, what the heck is that man going to do? What's going to happen in 2020? What's going to happen in 2030? What's going to happen in 2040? What's the likelihood that Tony Waller will own this business in 2050? Seriously. It's not going to happen. So the question is not whether to sell the company, it's when and how, to whom, and how do we protect the things that we care about. Most business owners don't have that conversation. They sell the company to another private investor, private equity firm, a competitor, what have you, and you know what happens. Fisher-Price. Pick your example. There have been other firms in town that have shut down over the years, right? We've also, again, I'm from Philadelphia. I've seen the whole industrial base of Philadelphia shut down because people picked up and went. We didn't want that to happen. So this is something that's extremely common in companies where the owner does not want to leave tomorrow, sail around the world, work on his golf game, and say goodbye. This is a circumstance. Imagine selling your car and telling the buyer, oh, by the way, I'm going to keep driving it for a while. And by the way, you can own it, but I don't want you to pay for it. You can pay me later. Would you do that? Not if you wanted to sell the car and disappear tomorrow. So these ESOPs are set up in situations where the owner is in the middle of a long-term transition. And there will be a transition at the leadership level eventually when the time is right. That's not happening now. There's no management change involved here. But there is an ownership change, buying the shares of stock, and that's what happened on September 26th. All of the shares of stock have been purchased and put into this retirement trust called an ESOP. What's it mean for you? Well, good old days, or in any other company that you might work for, you know that you get primarily salary, wages. Hopefully you have job security, you have job quality, you get some short-term benefits. Maybe even you get a retirement plan. That's the stuff that you already had this morning when you went to work. Tomorrow you go into work Do you lose any of that? No, we don't want to take any of that away. In fact, if you go around the United States and you say, how many private sector employees have any kind of retirement plan at all? Anybody have any idea? A little less than half. So you're already in the minority of companies that have any kind of retirement plan with a 401k. Now you have two. No change in the 401k, no change in the match. We're adding the ESOP on as a new kind of benefit. I'll talk to you a little bit about how that works. So this is really special. This is what's different, is you have all the things you had yesterday, plus you have a piece of the company. The whole idea is to maintain local ownership, to stay independent, not be owned by a competitor, to sustain your culture and values, to share the wealth with you. Eventually, when you leave the company, you will get your piece of the value of ownership of PTL. But you got to earn it. Because if we don't keep running a great company, there won't be anything there to share. So this is the gift is the opportunity. It's not a promise about what the shares will be worth in the future. We got the highest hopes that things will continue to go great. But we've got to make sure they do. And the takeaway message when I finish is going to be about let's just keep running an awesome business, because that's what it's going to take. If you said, what's the one thing you have to do to make the ESOP successful? Continue to run a terrific business. And if you do that, the ESOP can be extremely valuable to each and every person here. So, we've been looking at these ESOPs since 1974 when Congress installed them. One of the things that we've learned is that the ESOP by itself, in a company that isn't doing well, doesn't have much benefit. It's a company that's doing well where people have some kind of involvement can really help make better decisions, where you see dramatically increased performance. And if you look at, I'm not going to bore you with the statistical data studies. Take it from me because I'm on the foundation that funds a lot of these things. When you look at ESOPs, they grow faster, they have better retirement benefits, they have lower turnover rates, they have higher worker productivity, they have lower how many people in an average American company lost their jobs in the Great Recession? I don't mean 1930s, I mean 2008. The average U.S. company lost how many jobs? Anybody know? 12%. 12%. How about ESOP companies? 3%. 4 times lower job losses in the recession. Now, how do we know what's going to happen here? We don't. It's up to you. But the data's on your side, the opportunity's on your side, and the entire point of this is to keep the company locally owned and give you the incentive and the reward for continuing to make sure that it's run spectacularly well. Enough said about the concept of why. So what is this ESOP? What does it stand for? ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. This is a kind of federally regulated retirement plan. And you've got to be sitting there wondering to yourself, wait a minute, I thought you told me that Mr. Waller just sold the company. How come you keep talking about retirement plans? Well, the answer is that a senator named Russell Long, does that name ring a bell? Huey Long from Louisiana, you remember that name from the Great Depression? His son, Russell Long, grew up, didn't much like the idea of government-funded retirement benefits. What do we call that? Social Security. He thought, well, there's got to be a better way. He didn't have a good answer, but he ran into an economist named Lou Kelso. There's no test on this. You don't have to remember this. Russell Long met an economist who said the problem with capitalism is we don't have enough capitalists. We don't have a way to share wealth with working people who help us build our companies. And together, Lou Kelso and Russell Long got the ESOP inserted into the pension law back in 1974. Do you care? I don't know. Point is, there's a lot of them out there. We've been at this for a while, and you're joining a family, a large family of companies for whom keeping the business locally owned and controlled and making sure that it continues to thrive and provides a new opportunity to share wealth with employees, that's something that's really catching on. If you look around the United States, I'll come back to the 401k. If you look around the United States, there are about 11,000 ESOPs. They cover 14 million participants, and they're worth about $920 billion. That's about the entire amount of money in the federal TARP plan a couple of years ago. Remember everybody was talking about $1 trillion? There's about $1 trillion of wealth in ESOP companies. I don't know what your 401k is worth. Does anybody have any idea what the average 401k in the United States is worth? Any idea? 71, sorry? Not much. Ask me tomorrow. Look it up in the paper. $71,000. How about the average ESOP account? Average across the United States. $191,000. Almost 3 times more. Again, can I promise you you're going to have that? You know, if I start to sound like I'm making promises, grab your wallet and head for the hills. Right? Because I'm going home to Philly. And it's yours. You're going to have to earn it. But the track record for ESOPs where people lean into it and earn it is extremely positive and long-standing across the American economy. Back to the 401k plan. Whose money is it? Mostly. It's yours, right? We can take that away? I got an idea. Let's take all that 401k money and give it to Mr. Waller. No, we're not going to do that. The 401k money is separate. It's in the 401k. Are we going to cut back on the 401k match? No. Keep doing it. We'll keep bribing you to do it. So where does the money from the ESOP come from? It's going to come from company profits in the future. That means it's increasingly more and more important that we generate profits in the future so we can pay for something that we've put in place but we haven't yet paid for. The big difference between the 401k and the ESOP, if you're a pessimist and you think PTL is going down the toilet, which one is safer? 401k. How about if the company's going to go through the ceiling and continue to grow like gangbusters? Which one's going to make you a lot more money? ESOP. Okay, so what's the right answer? That's a trick question. Which one's the right answer? Both. So we're going to keep both. You want the 401k, you should not stop saving for retirement because the ESOP is at risk. If there's one sincere, honest criticism of ESOPs, it's that all your eggs are in one basket. True? All your eggs are in one basket. You better protect it like a hawk. What do those financial advisors tell you? Diversify, diversify, diversify. Now let me ask you a question. If you're like most Americans, what's your biggest ownership asset? What's the thing that you own that's worth more than anything else today? Your home? How diversified is that? Is that invested in 150 different houses? It's all invested in one thing? What did your financial advisor tell you to do? Diversify. So here's an idea for you. I want you to go home tonight and I want you to sell your house, move into a rental property, and invest in something safe like the stock market. And you're going to look at me like I'm from Mars, right? It's not Mars, it's just Philadelphia. Where do you spend more time? Home or work? Why do we want to own our homes and we're not quite sure we want to own our jobs? Employee ownership in the U.S. is doing for business ownership what home ownership does for us at home. We own our home. Do you want it to make money eventually? You bet. But why do you primarily own your home? Because you want to live there. Why do you own the business? Because we live here. And we want to make sure it's owned and controlled in the right way. And in the long run, we want it to pay off just like you want your house to pay off. And it should. It should pay off a bundle of money. We can't tell you how much. We don't know. But it's like owning your home and controlling it. It's different from the 401k, even though it's a kind of retirement plan. There are a lot of details. We're going to give you a handout as you walk out to give you more of them. Let me share a few further thoughts with you. Some sample ESOPs from around the United States. The biggest one, anybody ever go to Disney? And you were outraged at the prices on the Disney campus, so you stopped at the supermarket and went shopping, and you went shopping in a store called Publix Markets. Publix is the single largest majority-owned ESOP company in the U.S. It's got 160,000 employee owners. Or you might go up to King Arthur Flour in Vermont. That's the oldest one that I know. They've been making flour in the United States since 1790. They've been at it a few years. And if you ask their CEO, why do you have an ESOP? He says, because I want to be making flour in Norwich, Vermont 200 years from now. That's a long-term vision. I don't know whether PTL will be here in 200 years. 30, 40, 80, sure would be nice. If you go out to the West Coast, anybody ever have a Fat Tire ale? I know you might have to leave the county, but, right? Fat Tire? Fat Tire ale, you were drinking Esop. Esop, New Belgium Brewing Company, is an Esop beer company in Fort Collins, Colorado. Any exercise nuts that eat Cliff Bars? Cliff Bars, an Esop company. Hot dog on a stick. ESOP. Okay, so I go around the country and point out all these different ESOP companies. Mostly I want to talk about yours, but I want to give you a flavor of them because what you're doing is unusual, but it's not weird. It's something that's been around since 1974 and is increasingly common, not for the guy that wants to maximize and scrape every last nickel off the table and go to Greece. Nothing against Greece. Beautiful place, right? But for the guy that wants to stick around and help make sure the company's successful for a while as part of a long-term transition, the ESOP is a fabulous answer. And so it's a really ideal fit here, where we're not imagining any huge change tomorrow. There's a bunch of websites. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but there's so many ESOPs around the country that there's now competing trade associations. And those of us that are in the ESOP business go to these meetings all the time and learn more and more about them. So how does it work overall? This is pretty easy. In August, I think I said 2012 here, but this was true through August of 2013, Mr. Waller owned the shares. As we sit here today, how many shares does he own? How many? Zero? Zero. Where are they? They're in this retirement trust called an ESOP. 100% of the stock is now in the ESOP retirement trust. We haven't paid for it yet. We're going to pay for it over a series of years. Here's what's beautiful. Don't try this at home. Once the ESOP owns 100% of the stock, you ready for this? We get to stop paying federal income tax. That sounds like it shouldn't be true. So let me say it again. Once the ESOP owns 100% of the stock, PTL, not you personally, you don't get to stop paying federal income tax. Okay, so this is on being videoed and broadcast. You will get in trouble if you stop paying federal income tax. But the company gets to stop paying federal income tax. So when I told you that we haven't paid for it and we took on some debt, the hair should have gone up on the back of your neck just a little bit, because debt makes us a little nervous. But you know what? We have all of Uncle Sam's money to play with now. The federal government and most state governments have said, we're going to cut you a break because we know what ESOPs do for company performance and we want more of them. So we're going to let you stop paying income tax at the company level in order to help pay for this. I don't know about you, but to me this is a thing of beauty, right? And that money's not going to enrich the Wallers. That money is going to the company to help pay for this and to help make sure that we have money to grow for the future. So fair is fair, right? There's been a long-term buildup. Now it's time to buy out that stock. We need a way to do it. We're doing it through the ESOP, and the federal government is helping by making the company, in effect, a tax-exempt organization, right? Do not try this at home. Doesn't work for you. Okay, in case you were wondering, when do I get to vote on whether I like my boss? When do I get to vote on what time to go to work? There's a real short answer. You know, you don't. This is not the People's Republic of Murray. We're not trying to create a voting democracy. What we're trying to do is run a business. And that business, for most purposes, is going to stay exactly the way it has been, with Tony Waller continuing in his existing position. In fact, he's got an agreement that they required him to sign to make sure he stays and doesn't go anywhere anytime soon. So that's a good thing. On the other hand, way up here at the top, you have these shareholders, and that was Mr. Waller, and now is the ESOP. And where you fit is you're a beneficiary of this trust. Steve Smith started to talk about this. So all of you who are employees will meet the requirements, and all of these rules are spelled out in legal documents so that you can become participants in the ESOP trust. All of that stock will be held by the trustee and will be paid out to you when it's your turn. Let's take a look at the rules. So there is, for what it's worth, there's a small number of issues on which you might get to vote in the distant future. I've been in the ESOP business for 25 years, and I've seen this happen twice. So if you were a gambling person and you wanted to bet on whether you're going to vote on anything, I'd say you'd a pretty safe bet to say no, there's never going to be a vote on anything. What does it really mean? It really means you get wealth. You get the opportunity to build wealth and share in it slowly over a long period of time. In the ESOP, remember we said we haven't paid for the shares? I have the 1.5-hour version of this presentation, and I am not going to force feed it to you after dinner on a weeknight. But at some point in the future, we'll come back and unpack this in more detail. For tonight, the point that I want to make is, we haven't paid for the stock. We bought it all because we wanted to be 100% employee-owned, partly so we can stop paying federal income tax, but we haven't paid for the stock. So it's all in a holding pen that we're going to call a suspense account. And every year, we're going to take some company profits and we're going to pay off the loans, and all of you who participate will start to get shares in your account. Anybody want to guess what's the likelihood you're going to have $100,000 on your ESOP statement when you get it next spring? Get over it. I'm not big on making promises, but I can tell you that ain't going to happen. Even though the average ESOP account is worth $190-something thousand, it takes a while for that to build up. And so there are going to be a series of contributions over many years, and you will gradually get more and more stock in your ESOP account. The first year, it's going to be low. Expect it to be low. The first year, when you get that ESOP statement, you should be thinking Fisher-Price. Right? That's what this is about. It's about keeping the company here. And eventually, you'll start to see that stock value grow, and over the next few years, you'll see the companies like Publix and Lowe's, the successful ESOPs, pay off very substantial retirement benefits to their ESOP participants. Okay? So, if you leave, you'll stop getting new contributions, and when new employees come to join us, they will start getting contributions as soon as they meet the rules. That begs the question of what are the rules. I'm going to cover this really fast because we're going to give you the handout that's got all the rules and examples spelled out in it. And what we'd like you to do is take it home. And one of the reasons to have you spouses here is as spies, so you know, because we know that you'll ask tough questions. So we're asking you to take a look at this and help us make sure that we're explaining it clearly, not all tonight, but over a period of time. The way I think about the ESOP rules is the way I think about setting up a bank account for my daughter. I've got kids who are now 19 and 16, but when they were younger, we wanted to have them have accounts at the bank so we could put their allowance in so that, they could start to manage a, very small amount of money, but it would be theirs. So you go into the bank the first day, and up trots my little daughter to the teller, and she says, well, my daddy says I'm going to have a bank account. I'd like to make a withdrawal. Right? And that's the normal question that the normal human being has, which is, Jerry Maguire, when am I going to get my money? And I'm telling you, we got to get the money in there before you can take it out. So there's 4 things that you have to do to get benefits out of the ESOP, all spelled out in the handout. Number 1, you have to earn the right to participate. And the quick news is most of you who were here for some time are already participants in the ESOP. But there are some rules, and we have to apply them fairly, and new employees are going to have to earn their way in. The second thing that you have to do is you have to get deposits into your account. We're going to call those contributions and allocations. In other words, when we pay off the loan and those shares drop down into the accounts, that's when you get deposits. And there's rules on what you have to do to qualify to get that contribution each year. One thing that I'd like to go out of my way to point out is that the vast majority of ESOPs in the U.S., out of those 11,000 some odd ESOPs that we have, they divvy up those shares according to payroll. That's the normal way of doing it. Mr. Waller looked at that, Chuck and Tom, everybody looked at that and said, well, wait a minute. How about all those people that have been with us all these years? Isn't there a better way to reward them than that? And so they made an adjustment in the ESOP rules so that if you've been here a longer period of time, you get more shares. So there's a formula in the document that shows you an example of how you get your allocation. It's divvied up half by salary and half by your years of service. So those of you who've been here a long time get an extra consideration. For those of you that are, how many of you are brand new employees? Sorry, dude. Stick around, you know. This, you know, we're going to grow. And we're going to have new employees, and we want you to join. That's why it's a long-term plan, and you will get in according to the rules, just like everybody else. But this is designed to reward people that have been here a while in the first year. And next year, you'll still keep giving the shares out partly by salary and partly by years of service, except next year you'll have a year of service. And the year after you'll have 2, or however many you have. We'll be adding to it. So everybody's in, everybody's treated by the same set of rules. Then can I lose it? Vesting. Yeah, there's a 5-year schedule. It's spelled out in the takeaway, in the handout. Essentially, if you want to make sure that you get your shares, you have to work here for 5 years. Then when you leave the company, and particularly when you retire and we get the loans paid off, then we'll pay out your balance. Again, it's all described. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You got to get in and get an account. Number 2, we have to make deposits into your account. Number 3, you have to stick around and get vested. And number 4, leave the company, and we'll pay you out after the appropriate holding periods. All of the details spelled out in the documents. How are we doing? Generally makes sense? That ought to smell a lot like the 401k. The rules are slightly different, but they're the same kinds of rules that you would see in any type of retirement plan. So, what could it be worth? I would like to be able to tell you your ESOP was going to be worth $192,000. I'd like to be able to tell you, like our friend at Public Supermarkets, a guy who was a warehouse forklift driver, and he worked there for 40 years. And he rose up to be a warehouse supervisor. So we're not talking a corporate mucky-muck. His sister retired from Sears at the same time. What do you think Sears gave her after 40 years? Any guesses? She got a retirement of $35,000. And her brother, the guy at Publix, remember, this is unusual. This is the biggest ESOP in the U.S. What did he get? Come on, be bold. What's that? $250,000. Keep going. Million. Keep going. $1.5 million. Now, if I sit here and promise you $1.5 million out of this ESOP, like I said, run for the hills. Because I'd be kidding you. I don't know what it's going to be worth, and I think if you imagine it's going to be worth $1.5 million, we might be exaggerating. On the other hand, let's not undersell it. The ESOP can be worth real wealth. So the starting point is to give Mr. Waller a way to sell his stock without doing Fisher Price. The ending point is that you get to share in the wealth that you help create, whatever that may be. And we hope it'll be a lot, but we don't know yet. This is day 1. Or actually, it's day 30-something. It was in September 26th. But we're just getting started. And I can tell you that the statements next spring will be low because we're just getting going. But over time, you should see some real dollars start to build up as we see in most other ESOPs. How do we know what it's worth? Well, that's what we got Michael for. Prairie Capital, his firm, does the ESOP appraisal on behalf of the trust. Because we're not IBM, we're not Coca-Cola, we're not Google. I know, anybody, guys, we're all thinking you were Google, right? Is anybody imagining we were going to go public and everybody would be millionaires tomorrow? You know, realistically, this is a much more conservative, down-to-earth kind of growth strategy. But because we're not there, what happens if you go and you look up in the Chicago Tribune or the New York Times or some big paper and you look in the stock section and you look for PTL? What do you see? Is it in there? Why not? Because if you want to be an owner of Paschall Truck Lines, There's only a half dozen people in the room that don't qualify, and they're all up on stage, and it's not the guys you recognize. It's the rest of us. If we want to be owners of PTL, we can do it the old-fashioned way. Knock on the door and apply for a job. You don't get to be an owner of this company unless you work here. And therefore, there's no market price for the shares. So we've got to hire a guy, in this case Michael, and his firm, Prairie Capital, to determine what the fair market value of those shares is. The methods that they use are complicated. They're what the big boys use on Wall Street. And I'm going to describe them briefly, but don't worry, I'm not going into a lot of, stay after class and clap the erasers math. But if you're interested, Michael will be happy to explain it in detail later. Basically, we're going to go out and look at what other companies like you are worth. What have they been sold for? We're going to look at your future profit. And just for kicks, we're going to look at what would be the fire sale value of the company, just to make sure that we're worth more than that, which we are. So these formulas that they use, literally, one of them won the Nobel Prize in economics. So we're not going to do the math tonight. My point in saying it is that Mr. Waller does not get to sit in the back room and make up a number. He's actually got to negotiate with the trustee, and the trustee has a financial advisor, and the financial advisor is sitting here on the stage, and they say, what's the maximum that the ESOP can pay? End of story. And that valuation process will be conducted on an annual basis so that you have a fair, outside, independent evaluation of what the value of your stock is each year. And we'll give you more information about how that process goes, and any math nerds in the bunch will talk a little bit more about how the mechanics of the process work. Obviously, some of the things out there you can't control. What happens to gas prices? What happens to the market? But there are things that you can control. And so the big message here is, how do you run an awesome company? How do you control the things you can so that the other guy is the one that suffers and you're the one that does well when the economy goes down and when the economy comes back? How do we compete effectively as an independently owned company? If you look to the future, you're going to get, I'm going to talk to you about the details for a second, then I want to step up kind of to the big picture. The details, tonight, you're going to walk away with a Q&A document that is about something a little over 20 questions about the ESOP. There is no way we're going to answer all of your questions in that document, but we're probably going to make a good running head start. Number two, in a couple of weeks, you'll be getting a legal document, a summary plan description, that describes in legally binding terms how the ESOP works. Normally, I would say that document's really good if you're having trouble sleeping, but the folks that are writing it are also with us, and they do a good job, and it's written more or less in English. So you're going to get the quick version tonight, and you're going to get the detailed legal version soon, and then you'll also get a beneficiary form to fill out who should get your benefits if something were to happen to you. Next spring and every year going forward, you'll get a statement showing your ESOP benefits, except maybe not you if you weren't here, but the year after you'll get one, right? Because there are rules, and you have to get in. And then under consideration is more ESOP education based on what you tell us you want to hear more about. So we want to get your questions, and we want to make sure that we're paying attention and answering the right questions. Big picture. Big picture. What's this about? You have an awesome company. You know that. You also know that Mr. Waller is not going to own that company forever. And you kind of have an idea of who this guy is. You know that he's not interested in turning his back on the community. So you know that we're looking for a way to buy and own that company that will respect the values on which you've built it. That's what the ESOP's about. It's complicated, it's messy, there's a lot of federal rules, but when the dust settles, Fisher-Price, we can do better. This is about keeping the company here, keeping it locally owned, and sharing the opportunity with all of you. The ESOP does not change the need to run a good business. What it does change is how you share in the benefits. One of our clients last spring said to us something that really stuck with me. She said, nothing has changed, but everything's different. You're going to go to work tomorrow and you're going to find out that you still got your same old job to do. You're going to go to work tomorrow and find out the pain in the neck customer is still the pain in the neck customer. What's different is how you take care of them as an owner. So what I'd like you to do, we've got the email addresses up here. You know how to find these guys. I want to give you a couple of minutes. Turn to your neighboring owner. And what I'd like you all to do in small, I'm not going to make you count off or anything. Just get in groups of 4 to 6 people. And I'd like you to identify one question that we forgot to answer. And we're going to go around the room and we're going to pick 2 or 3 questions just to get you started. And then we're going to wrap up. We're not going to do an hour-long Q&A, or you're never going to get home to your family. But we do want to give you a chance to ask us the 2 or 3 things that we forgot to explain. So talk to your fellow owners. Come up with a really doozy of a question for us, and we'll take a couple of them in a few minutes. Okay, what else did we forget to ask? Sir? So I'm going to repeat the question so it's so they can hear it on the camera. Question is, on the annual valuation, are you all going to be able to see the revenue and costs and all of the details? Short answer is no. The ESOP trustee will see that information, and what they will report to you and you will see on your statement is the share price. Michael, do you want to comment on that as the appraiser? You said that. And a holler so that we can hear you. Okay? So there's a baseline year 1. There is a baseline year 1, yes. Yes. And, one way to think about it is your house. We just borrowed some money, and so that is going to knock the price a little bit. And then as you pay that debt back, your equity grows. So we're hoping to see pretty good equity growth as we pay off the debt over time. I don't know if that's foreign language to people or if you know what I'm talking about, but you'll be hearing us discuss these things a lot over the next several years. Others, someone else. Yes, sir. Is there a time frame to pay off the debt? Yes, there is, but I don't know what it is. What's the time frame to pay off the debt?
Well, let me add something to that. There is a time frame. It can be paid off if we do better. It's paid off faster. But hopefully you pay it off in 5 years, because I don't get paid till the debt's paid off. Okay? So, the bad news is you're not getting rid of me if you think you are. But in order for this plan to work, the debt that was borrowed from the bank has to be paid prior to myself getting the last 50% of the value of the company. So that's the reason I'm hanging around. And hopefully, it'll go for 5 or 6 years. We can pay the debt off, and I'll renew my contract for another 6. But today, the way it's set up is that we need to pay the debt to the bank first, and then the debt to me for the stock second. But if that answers your question. And we can do it in a real short period of time. I'd love to see we get it done in 3 years. So I'm going to be a lot more difficult than I have been in the past. Because now I'm an employee too. Okay, so we need everybody's help on that.
So that's 2 pretty good ones. Anybody else over here have a stump the experts? Yes, sir.
How does this affect the part-time employee?
How does this affect the part-time employee? Chuck.
To be eligible to participate in the plan, you have to work for the company for 1,000 hours in a 1-year period. So if you're a part-time employee and you work more than 1,000 hours, you're eligible to participate on the same basis as anyone else.
1,000 hours, if you do the math, a full work year is 2,080 hours. So 1,000 hours in effect is about half time.
20 hours a week.
Yeah, 20 hours a week, give or take. If you're working right about 20, You want to be sitting down and counting those hours and making sure you know, because you're going to be on the cusp, right on the border. If you're working 30 hours a week, you're almost certainly going to be in. And if you're working 5, 10 hours a week, you're almost certainly not going to be in. Okay, one more, and then let's let you get home to families. We got all of our gurus in the back. We're happy to stay and mingle, but we don't want to keep you. I want to turn it over to close to Chuck and Tom. Let's do one more, and then we'll wrap up. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay. On the vesting, the 5 years vesting, is that start now or is it retroactive?
The 5 years vesting starts 2013 for ESOP purposes. It doesn't affect anything in the 401k plan. The ESOP's a new plan, so the vesting starts new. This will be the first year. Okay, you'll have a lot more questions. We want you to ask them. We want you to email them in. We may be setting up a central email address to take them. All kinds of things are going to fall into place to make sure that you understand your ESOP information. You'll be getting the handout on the way out. You can have a chance to talk to the gurus on the way out. Let's think about what does this mean for our future for a minute.
Thank you, Alex. We appreciate that. It can get sort of complex. It's, as Tom says, it's simple if you say it real fast. We own the stock. It's our company. But there are a lot of rules that come into play. It is heavily regulated. And we'll be having educational opportunities in the next several weeks to tell you all a little bit more in detail about how this is going to work. We had 5 or 6 guys on the stage tonight. For every guy that was on the stage, there were 5 or 6 other guys that weren't here that were involved in this deal. We had a lot of attorneys, a lot of accountants, a lot of consultants involved in this deal. And I tell you that, not because it's want you to think it's some big time deal we're involved in, but I want you to know that this is not something that Tony Waller dreamed up as a way to sell his stock. This is a heavily regulated plan by the Department of Labor, ERISA, and it takes a lot of professionals to put it together, and we're going to be living with those professionals in the future. We'll have an annual valuation, and that valuation will determine what your share price is going to look like each year. Each spring, you will receive the statement from the evaluator, and you'll know what the share price is, and the longer you've worked with us, the more shares you'll have. It's really not that hard when you say it fast like that. But we thank you for coming out. It's dark now, and it's dark when you got here. We short days, and we know it's a lot of effort to come out on a Tuesday night, but we wanted you to do this because this is important. It's a great opportunity for us. It keeps the company here in Murray, and I'm thankful for that. I think all of us should be thankful for that. So I want to thank Tony Waller for making this decision. He had other options, but this one he felt like was fair to him and was the best outcome for the employees. So I'm grateful he made this choice, and I think you should be too. Thank you.
This is one time I get the last word. And I just want to say, welcome owners. Tony Waller gave us something to shoot for. For 40 years, he got us here. And look at what we have to do. We either have to do as good or better. We need to do better so we can get the loan paid off for the shares and also get him paid off. So welcome owners. Thank you very much for coming out on a Tuesday night. Have a great evening, and I'll be happy to call you owners tomorrow. Good night, everybody.